People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. PETA. Extreme, maybe, self-indulgent, abusive, maybe violent. And they've just launched yet another campaign, and this one is rather tenuous, but you've got to admit, sometimes they can be effective, if provocative. I think that's probably the point. J. Justin Wilson is from PETA Kills Animals, and he joins us from Washington. Welcome to you, sir.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
PETA kills animals, but I thought they were in love with animals.
You know, PETA has a very dirty secret. They operate an animal shelter at their headquarters in Virginia, and we sent in some requests for the state government to send us their animal shelter operations documents. It turns out that they've been putting down between 90 and 95% of the animals that they take in every year. They have one of the highest kill rates of any animal shelter in the state. In fact, the one just down the road from them, their kill rate is only 60%. And so when PETA says that they're for people for the ethical treatment of animals, I question that.
Now, is there any context? So could it be the animals they're receiving are wounded, hurt, terribly ill, and so they have to euthanize them to a higher extent than other shelters?
You know, I think that's PETA's defense, but it does not seem to match with the facts. In fact, a few years ago, PETA's employees were caught euthanizing animals in the back of a van and dumping them in a dumpster. And when the police caught them doing that, the animals they put in the dumpster included puppies and kittens, animals PETA listed as being adoptable. And the idea that they don't even put any effort into trying to rehabilitate these animals, they just put them down, really should shock anyone. And I think fundamentally it should lead people to question the sort of true motivations. The president of PETA, Ingrid Newkirk, once explained why they put down animals, and I'm paraphrasing her, but pretty honestly, when she said, well, we could go no-kill tomorrow, but it would mean we'd have to stop doing all of the good things that we do. And I said to myself, wait a minute, so they could save a bunch of animals' lives, but that would mean fewer press stunts and fewer naked women in front of, various meat-eating events. It really, they're provocative, but they're provocative at the cost of the lives of animals, and there's obviously a heck of a lot of hypocrisy here.
Look, I can't stand them. I think they're anti-human. I find them very offensive. I think they're sport and self-indulgent. But I'm surprised that people who work for the organization don't actually care about animals. I always disagree with them, but I assume that they were committed to a cause. What you're saying is it's all very, very cynical. The people who work in these shelters simply do not care about the animals they claim to look after.
You know, I think it's a little bit different than actually. I think that the only reason I can understand this is that PETA thinks that these animals, as they've put it, would be better off dead than stuck in a cage. And, obviously we can't ask the animals their opinion here, but that kind of mentality, I think, strikes many Americans and Canadians as absolutely antithetical to the way that we care for the animals in our care, our pets, and animals generally. And so, PETA's philosophy, the core of their belief is what they say, total animal liberation. And what that means is that we don't use animals for food, we don't use them for work, we don't have pets. It goes on, and in this case, I think what their mind is that, well, the total animal liberation here is that these animals be better off dead than actually doing, having owners or being stuck at home or whatever PETA thinks is, sort of the enslavement. In fact, a few months ago, PETA sued SeaWorld because they argued that the killer whales were enslaved. They argued that it was in violation of the United States Constitution because those animals were slaves to SeaWorld. And thankfully, a judge laughed it out of court. And I think more and more people are realizing that PETA's overall credibility is decreasing. In fact, from 2005 to 2010, PETA's overall popularity amongst Americans has fallen in double digits for that reason, I think.
What you just said, I mean, that is incredibly offensive. For an organization that's overwhelmingly white and middle class, in particular, trying to compare the plight of black people in the United States to that of whales, right, for goodness sake, in an amusement park. But when you say that they dump the body, look, I know what you're saying here, that they have this strange belief that being in a cage or even being looked after at home is somehow so bad that kill them instead. But then to dump their bodies into a dumpster shows a complete contempt for the creature they claim to care about.
Absolutely, and that's why that, you know, it went to trial, and it was just so shocking that they wouldn't even give these animals a degree of dignity, because, you know, PETA is the one who seems to think that we should give animals rights and treat them like humans, and yet to not even give these animals dignity, I'm using a word that we would normally reserve for humans, of at least being given a chance to live, is what's so frustrating here. That's the thing. You know, PETA's argument is, well, we only accept the most bedraggled animals, and I say to them, do you even try to help these animals? In fact, here's what's happened recently. In 2010, the state of Virginia did a surprise inspection on PETA's animal shelter. And I'm putting that in scare quotes because I don't think it's much of a shelter. And the inspector said that he wanted to have it renamed a euthanasia clinic. And when he went up to the shelter, the person at the front desk didn't even know it existed. He said, I'm here to inspect the shelter. And she said, we don't have an animal shelter here. And he said, wait a minute. So when he inspected it, he found that they didn't have any cages. It was just a couple of rooms inside their cubicle areas, and that what seemed to immediately become clear was that fewer than 15% of the animals were kept for more than 24 hours. They were taking the animals in and putting them down nearly immediately, and they weren't even giving these animals a shot at getting adopted. And any animal shelter worth its salt here in the United States or in Canada is at least going to give the animals an opportunity to be adopted by someone. Yet PETA, and this is why the state of Virginia tried to revoke their animal shelter license, PETA doesn't even try to have an adoption. They don't even advertise that they run an animal shelter. Yeah. They don't have adoption weekends or adopt-a-thons. They don't do all of the things that all of the other animal shelters in our country try to do so that animals can have a good life, you know, being with humans. And I think fundamentally it goes to their philosophy of the fact that they don't think animals and humans belong together.
I think you're absolutely right. Very briefly, anyone out there could be a decent person who wants to give money to try and improve the life and the death of animals, and they're tempted by PETA because they're massively high publicity profile. What would you say? Is there an alternative you'd recommend?
Absolutely. There are an enormous number of local animal shelters that need your support, and they are the people who are doing the yeoman's work, saving animals, day in and day out, and it's not easy work. Trust me, I've spoken with an enormous number of people at animal shelters, and they could really use your support.
Yeah, good stuff. Amazing, actually. I had no idea of the details of all that. It's quite shocking, but I suppose I'm not really that surprised. Thank you so very much indeed.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Have a nice afternoon.